I was looking at my calendar this morning.
Just staring at the grid,
Yeah, literally just staring at the grid of days, and I had this really weird realization.
which was what?
Well, we treat time like it's this endless, flat, industrial conveyor belt. Like Tuesday is exactly the same as Wednesday.
Which is the same as next Thursday.
Right. It's just ticks on a clock. A unit is a unit is a unit.
And that is a very modern, very industrial view of time. It's linear, it's monotonous, it demands the exact same output from you on February 1st as it does on July 1st.
Exactly. But then you look out the window or you look at basically any agricultural society, and that is simply not how the world works. Nature doesn't do flat time.
Nature does seasons.
Yes. There is a time to plant and a time to harvest and a time where everything looks totally dead but is actually just sleeping. And then a time where everything explodes into color, the environment changes, and because the environment changes, your behavior has to change.
And that is precisely the argument of the stack of documents we are diving into today. The premise here is that just as the physical world has seasons, the spiritual world has a seasonality.
Right.
Time itself is not uniform in these texts. Some moments are heavier than others. Some nights are thicker with meaning.
So for today's deep dive into the source material, we're looking at a really specific, really dense collection of historical texts. These are narrations and traditions, what are called hadith.
And they map out a spiritual trilogy, basically.
Yeah, it's a 3-month arc, Rajab Shaban, and then the climax, which is Ramadan. And our mission for this deep dive is to decode the architecture of this specific spiritual season.
I think architecture is definitely the right word there, because we aren't just talking about the rules of, don't eat a sandwich during the day.
Right.
We are seeing reports from the 7th century, from the Prophet Muhammad, from his family, from his closest companions like Umar and Ali, and they describe an entire metaphysical infrastructure.
We're going to talk about literal gates opening in the sky, ledgers of life and death being edited, and massive construction projects in the afterlife.
It is a fascinating worldview because it suggests that the rules of physics for the soul actually shift during this window of time.
Completely. But before we get to the hunger and the fasting of Ramadan, we have to start where the texts start, which is the warm-up.
Which begins 2 whole months early.
Yeah, this is the month of Rajab. Now, usually, people just think about Ramadan a few days before it starts. You panic buy some dates and you check the local start time on your phone.
That's the modern way, yeah.
But the sources here paint a picture of a much, much longer runway. There is a specific prayer mentioned in the texts, right?
Right. This is a narration attributed to the companion Anas bin Malik. It says that when the moon of Rajab was sighted, so we're talking 60 days out from the main event, the prophet would say, "Oh God, bless us in Rajab and Shaban, and let us reach Ramadan."
Let us reach Ramadan. That phrasing really stuck out to me when I was reading it. It sounds almost like a survival request.
It creates a real sense of fragility, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It implies that reaching the season is absolutely not guaranteed. You are actively acknowledging that human life is precarious. You're asking for barakah, which is blessing in the preparation time, but you are also setting a firm destination in your spiritual GPS.
It changes the psychology completely. Instead of Ramadan being this heavy burden that just crashes into your busy schedule, it becomes a finish line you are actively hoping to cross. Like, please just keep me alive long enough to get to the starting line.
Exactly. And then you move into the 2nd month, which is Shaban. And this is where the source material gets heavy. I mean, really heavy.
Yeah, it does.
There is a specific night in the middle of Shaban, the 15th night, that is described in a way that honestly gave me pause when I first studied it.
This is the annual audit. The texts describe this night as the exact moment the entire administration of the universe shifts gears.
The phrasing in the narrations is that God descends to the lowest heaven on the night of the middle of Shaban. Now, theologically speaking, in this tradition, that signifies extreme urgency.
It signifies proximity, right?
Yes, the king is no longer in the high castle. He is in the courtyard. But what happens during this descent is what you call the audit.
It is so stark. The report says this is when the affairs of the year are managed. And specifically, it mentions 3 different lists being finalized. The list of provisions, the list of pilgrims, and the list of the living.
The list of the living is the one that just stops you in your tracks.
Yeah.
The text says that on this night, names are removed from the roster of the living and transferred to the roster of the dead. It is a finalized ledger for the coming year.
There is a specific image in the text that is just haunting to me. It says a man might be out shopping or getting married or planting a palm tree, totally oblivious to everything, but his name has already been extracted.
He is technically a dead man walking. He just doesn't know the date yet.
It forces a kind of confrontation with mortality that we usually spend our whole lives avoiding. We live as if we have infinite time. And this text comes in and says, no, the paperwork is actually filed annually.
And the details are rigorous, too. It says, regarding the list of pilgrims for the Hajj, no one is added and no one is subtracted. It's completely sealed.
So if you are listening to this and you believe that this is the night where your fate is being permanently sealed for the year, the logical next step is to ask, how do I survive the audit? If the ultimate CEO is reviewing my file, what exactly do I need to show?
And the text gives an answer. It says, God looks at his creation on this night to forgive them.
He forgives every human. That is the baseline rule.
It's a night of massive general amnesty, but, and this is really massive, but there is an exclusion clause.
The grudge exception.
Yes, the grudge exception.
I really want to spend some time here because this feels to me like the emotional core of the entire preparation phase. The text says God forgives everyone except two types of people. One is a mushrik, which is a polytheist.
Which makes sense within the framework of their theology.
Right. But the second one is a mushahin.
I am Mushahin. The root word here is shana. It translates to hostility, malice, or hatred. In some historical interpretations, it refers to a sectarian innovator who actively splits the community. But the most common understanding in all the ethical literature we looked at is someone who holds a deep grudge against a fellow believer.
This is terrifying, honestly. You could be praying all night long. You could be fasting every day. You could be donating all your money. But if you have this specific type of shana, this malice toward your brother or sister, the universal amnesty just bypasses you completely.
It suggests that your vertical relationship with God is intrinsically blocked by your horizontal relationship with other people.
Wow.
It's like a kink in a garden hose.
Yeah.
The mercy is flowing, the water's right there, but it simply cannot get through because of this massive blockage in your own heart.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second here. Humans are messy. People hurt us terribly. Is the text really saying I have to be best friends with everyone who ever wronged me? What if someone was actively abusive? Does clearing the grudge mean I have to invite them over for dinner and pretend nothing happened?
That is a crucial distinction to make. The scholars generally distinguish between setting a healthy boundary and harboring shana. You can and should remove a toxic person from your life. That is basic self-protection.
Okay.
Shana is different. Shana is actively wishing them ill. It's carrying that burning coal of resentment in your chest. It's rehearsing the argument in the shower every morning and wanting them to suffer. The text is basically saying you cannot enter the season of mercy if you were carrying a suitcase full of poison.
So it's heavily about the internal state of your mind. It's about letting go of the desire for revenge so that you can be open to receiving mercy yourself.
Precisely. It's a clear the decks moment. You can't load the new software of Ramadan if your hard drive is completely full of old, corrupted files.
Okay, so we have survived the audit. We have hopefully texted that person we were ignoring and cleared the air. The moon of Rajab is gone. Shaban is gone. We are standing right on the edge of the cliff. The new moon is sighted. Ramadan officially begins.
And this is where the cosmic shift happens. The source material describes the first night of Ramadan as a total atmospheric change in the metaphysics of the universe.
It is extremely dramatic. The prophet says there has come to you a blessed month, and then snap, 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 three major things happen instantly.
1, the gates of paradise open. 2, the gates of hell close. And 3, the rebellious devils are chained.
Let's look at the chaining of the devils, because that is the one that always confuses people when they first read this. The term used in the source is marada, right?
Right. Marada means the rebellious ones or the strongest ones.
Because the obvious question people ask is, if the devils are chained up, why do people still lie during this month? Why do people still steal? Why do I still get insanely angry in traffic during Ramadan?
Is the classic question. If all the bad guys are locked in jail, who committed the crime? The scholars explain this in 2 distinct ways. One is literal. It's only the big bosses that are chained, but the lesser impulses and minor devils remain active. But the far more profound explanation, and the one that gets more focus, is that it reveals the true nature of the nafs.
The nafs being the ego or the self.
Yes, so the training wheels are completely off.
Right, because for 11 months out of the year, you can always say, oh, well, the devil whispered to me. I was tempted.
But in Ramadan, that silence is deafening. If you do something bad, you can't look over your shoulder and blame a supernatural force. It's just you. It confronts you with your own base nature.
That is deeply humbling. But the text also implies the environment is heavily rigged in your favor to help you succeed. It mentions a caller.
Yes. A caller cries out every single night, "Oh, seeker of good, come forward. Oh, seeker of evil, desist."
I love the idea of this not being a metaphor, but an actual metaphysical reality. Like if we just had the right radio frequency, we would hear this broadcast loop every single sunset. Come forward, stop. Come forward, stop.
It creates a massive psychological tailwind for the practitioner. You feel incredibly supported by the universe. And the month itself has a rigid structure. It isn't just a uniform blob of 30 days. The tradition's divided into 3 distinct phases.
Right, the 3 10s.
Yes. The first 10 days are designated as mercy or Rama. The middle 10 days are forgiveness or Magfira. And the final 10 days are freedom from the fire, which is Itku Yin En honor.
It feels like a very deliberate progression, kind of like going through a car wash.
That is actually a great analogy. The first phase is just wetting the car. Mercy is soaking it, preparing the surface. The second phase is the intense scrubbing. That's forgiveness actively removing the dirt and the grime. And the final phase is the polish and the protection. That's the freedom from the fire. You simply cannot skip straight to the polish. You have to endure the whole process.
And while you are going through this process, the economic value of your time is absolutely skyrocketing. We really have to talk about the math in these documents because it is staggering.
It is spiritual hyperinflation in the best possible way. The text says that a voluntary good deed, like just smiling at someone or giving away a single dollar, is counted during this month as if it were a mandatory obligation or fard done in any other month.
And just for context for the listener in this theology, a mandatory deed is weighted much, much heavier than a voluntary one.
Vastly heavier. And then the text goes further. It says a mandatory deed like the 5 daily ritual prayers counts as 70 mandatory deeds done elsewhere. A flat 70 times multiplier.
Imagine if your local bank told you that for the next 30 days, every single deposit you make is multiplied by 70. You wouldn't sleep. You'd be finding random things in your garage to sell just to make more deposits.
And that is exactly the behavior we see in the historical records. People became utterly obsessed with maximizing this temporal window. And that obsession peaks with the night of decree, Laylat al-Qadr.
Which the text says is better than 1,000 months.
That is the literal math provided. One single night of worship equals 83 years and 4 months of continuous worship. It is an entire human lifetime compressed into a single dusk-to-dawn period. It functions essentially as a cheat code for a very short human lifespan. You might only live for 70 years on Earth, but through this night, you can accumulate 5,000 years of worship on your ledger.
It is ultimate efficiency. But let's pivot for a second to the why of it all. Why do people willingly put themselves through this intense physical deprivation, the hunger, the thirst, the long sleepless nights? The text provides some incredibly vivid motivations to keep people going. We are talking about the vivid descriptions of paradise.
And this is where we need to slow down and really look closely at the imagery used. Because these texts don't just say, oh, it'll be nice if you make it. They give you literal architectural blueprints. They appeal directly to human senses.
Let's start with the Gate of Rayyan.
Yes. The VIP entrance. The text states there's a specific gate in paradise called Rayyan. The name itself comes from the Arabic root word for irrigation or quenching a deep thirst. It is the gate of satisfaction. And only those who fasted in this life get to walk through it. Once they're all inside, it slams shut.
That kind of exclusivity appeals to something very deep in human nature, but then you get inside the gate. And the description of the gardens themselves, the text, says God built gardens entirely out of red ruby.
And notice it says, not just built with ruby as an accent, but hilt of ruby. The very substance of the place is precious gem. It says the foundations and the upper structures are interlaced with solid gold. The curtains are made of fine silk and brocade. And the scale of it all is hard to fathom. It says one single garden is 100 years long and 100 years wide.
Just try to visualize that for a second. 100-year journey just to walk across your own front lawn. And inside these massive gardens, there are palaces. 100,000 palaces per garden.
And the intricate detailing of those palaces. It mentions a white dome with a ceiling of green emerald. The color contrast they are painting there, the bright white and the deep green, the red ruby and the gold, it is meant to be visually stunning.
There's one image in the source material that I found really surreal. The Huri, the spouses of paradise, are described as living in tents made out of a single hollowed-out pearl.
A single hollowed-out pearl. Think about the pure geometry of that. A pearl is perfectly smooth, it is naturally iridescent, it is absolutely flawless. Living inside one implies a kind of perfect, glowing, serene privacy.
And the size of the oyster necessary to create a pearl that big, well, that is a whole different biological issue.
True.
But it clearly represents this absolute untouchable purity. And then the text talks about their clothing. It says 70 layers of distinct robes.
70 layers, each a different color and a different scent. It is highly engaging sight and smell simultaneously. And the furniture inside beds made of red ruby mattresses of silk brocade. It is deliberate sensory overload. It is specifically designed to make the listener who historically might be a very poor desert dweller sleeping on a rough reed mat feel that their current physical deprivation is entirely temporary.
But the detail that really hit me the hardest, the one that I think speaks so perfectly to the modern human condition, is about the food. It says they are served on golden platters and the last bite tastes exactly as good as the first.
That is easily the most profound philosophical point in the entire stack of documents we reviewed,
Why do you say that?
because of what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. In our current world, we suffer terribly from the law of diminishing returns. The first bite of a rich cheesecake is pure heaven. The third bite is pretty good. By the 10th bite, it's just cloying and heavy, and you kind of feel sick. We get used to things so fast.
Right, the new car is super exciting for a month, and then it's just the metal box you drive to work in.
Exactly. We are cursed as a species with perpetual boredom.
We acclimate to pleasure.
We do. But the text is promising that in this next life, the fundamental biology of pleasure is rewritten. There is zero acclimatization. The 1,000th year of eating feels as fresh as the very first minute. The last bite shocks your taste buds just as much as the first. It is a promise of eternal novelty.
And that elegantly solves the philosophical problem of eternity. Because usually eternity sounds incredibly boring. Like, what am I possibly going to do for 1 billion years? This answers it by saying you are going to be constantly awestruck. The feeling of first-time discovery never fades.
And to get to that place, you have to build it here. There is the famous narration about the ghost castles.
I really love this concept.
The text says, for every single day, a person fasts. A massive castle of pearl with 70,000 doors of red ruby is built for the believer in the unseen world.
So while you are sitting there at your desk at 5 p.m., your stomach is aggressively growling that caffeine withdrawal headache is really kicking in.
Metaphysical construction is happening. You are actively converting your physical hunger into masonry. You aren't just losing a lunch, you are quite literally buying a ruby door. It completely reframes the localized suffering as a highly lucrative investment transaction.
But, and this is the biggest but we will discuss today, the text immediately pivots from these grand promises. You cannot just starve yourself and expect a ruby palace to pop up. There is a massive warning label attached to all of this architecture.
The empty fast. The text is brutal here. It says there are many who stand in prayer at night and get nothing out of it but fatigue. There are many who fast during the day and get absolutely nothing but thirst.
It's a total nightmare scenario. You do all the hard work, you feel all the pain, and the cosmic registrar looks at you and says, 0 credit. Try again next year.
And the reason for that is the definition of fasting in these sources goes way, way beyond the stomach. They call it the body fast. One narration says the hearing, the sight, the tongue, and the limbs must also actively fast.
So if I am fasting from food, but I am scrolling through vicious gossip on social media, or I am staring at things I definitely shouldn't be looking at, or I am casually lying to my boss to get out of a meeting,
then you are just dieting. You are technically starving your physical body, but you aren't fasting in the religious sense. The spiritual substance of the act is completely voided by the sins of the limbs. The container is there, but it has a huge hole in the bottom.
There's a very practical instruction in the text on how to handle this specifically regarding anger management, because hangry is a very real documented phenomenon.
Oh, it absolutely is. The prophet gave his followers a specific verbal script. He said if someone insults a fasting person or aggressively tries to pick a fight, the prescribed response shouldn't be to snap back or defend your honor. The response is to simply say, I am fasting. I am fasting.
He said to say it twice, right?
Twice, yes. Any sign. It acts as a verbal shield.
Imagine actually using that in real life today. Someone recklessly cuts you off on the freeway, they roll down their window to scream obscenities at you, and instead of screaming back, you just say out loud to yourself or to them, I am fasting.
It is a brilliant de-escalation technique. You are firmly declaring that you have stepped completely out of the normal rules of social engagement. You're essentially saying, I am currently in a sacred state. I cannot roll around in the mud with you right now because I have ruby doors to build.
It protects the integrity of the fast. And this intense discipline extends to how we treat others structurally, specifically people who work for us or under us. The text specifically mentions lightening the load.
This is a beautiful piece of proactive labor rights from the 7th century. It says that actively lightening the physical or mental load of one's servant, or in modern corporate terms, your employee or your direct reports during Ramadan, is a direct path to divine forgiveness.
So if you are a middle manager and you know your team is fasting and you deliberately slam them with mandatory overtime or a high-pressure arbitrary deadline at 4 p.m.,
You are totally missing the point of the month. The text operates on the principle that mercy begets mercy. If you want God to go easy on you during your annual audit, you have to go easy on your own employees. It turns daily empathy into a high-level ritual act.
and this flows seamlessly right into the broader social responsibility. Ramadan is frequently called the month of consolation or muasat, and the biggest, most visible way this is expressed in the community is through feeding people, the iftar.
The rewards mentioned for providing iftar, which is the evening meal to break the fast, are astronomical. The text explicitly says, whoever provides breakfast for a fasting person receives total forgiveness for their past sins and immediate freedom from the fire.
But here's the fascinating thing. The companions of the prophet, when they first heard this announcement, they basically panicked. They were mostly very poor people. They said, "Oh, messenger of God, not all of us can afford to host a lavish dinner for others." They genuinely thought they were being priced out of the spiritual reward market.
And the prophet's response democratized the entire system instantly. He said God grants this exact same massive reward even to someone who gives a sip of milk, a single date, or just a drink of water.
A simple drink of water, let's really do the math on that. A basic bottle of water costs what, maybe 50 cents if I hand that bottle to you right at sunset?
You get the full identical reward of my entire day of fasting. And the text adds a very crucial legal clause. It says, without diminishing the reward of the actual fasting person in the slightest. It is a metaphysical copy-paste function.
It's literally a pyramid scheme of grace. If I stand at a corner and feed 10 people a single sip of water, I get credit for 10 full days of fasting in roughly 1 minute.
Exactly. It actively encourages what I would call a mesh network of extreme generosity. Everyone is desperately trying to feed everyone else to maximize their own points. It completely breaks down the social barriers between the rich and the poor. You do not need to be a millionaire philanthropist to buy a single date or pour a glass of tap water.
And the text deeply connects this act of generosity to the sheer physical sensation of biological relief. There is that famous prayer the prophet used to say right at the moment he broke his fast, "The thirst is gone."
The veins are moistened, and the reward is fixed, if God wills.
The veins are moistened. Ibtalat aruk. That is such an incredibly tactile, visceral description. You know that exact feeling when you are severely dehydrated and you finally drink ice-cold water and you can almost feel it hitting your bloodstream and traveling through your body.
It anchors the lofty spiritual gratitude right in the messy physical relief. It acknowledges the reality of the human body. We aren't pure light angels. We have veins, we get dizzy, we get deeply thirsty. And that intense physical relief is framed as a direct sign of God's immediate mercy.
So the sun has finally gone down. We have eaten the dates, we have moistened the veins, we have secured the reward. Now the night shift officially begins. This brings us to the Tare, which are the special extended night prayers. And looking closely at the history here, it absolutely wasn't just a static tradition that suddenly popped up fully formed out of nowhere. It has a really dynamic, evolving backstory.
It evolved rapidly over a few decades. It's a genuinely great historical example of how an early community found its long-term rhythm. The sources trace 3 distinct phases of this prayer. Phase 1 is the prophet himself. The texts say he prayed with the people in the main mosque for only 3 nights of the month, specifically the 23rd, 25th, and 27th nights.
And the crowds just grew massively each night, right?
Exponentially. By that 3rd night, the mosque was completely packed to absolute capacity. People were spilling out. But then on the 4th night, nothing happened. The prophet simply didn't come out of his house.
The people were just out there waiting in the dark. The text says they started making noise, coughing loudly, basically trying to get his attention to lead them.
And he deliberately stayed inside. The next morning, he explained his reasoning. He said, I feared it would become legally mandatory upon you, and you would not be able to physically maintain it. It was a calculated act of mercy. He knew their human limits. He didn't want to burn them out or accidentally create a brand new religious obligation that would inevitably crush future generations.
So that is phase 1. Then the prophet passes away. Phase 2 occurs under the leadership of Abu Bakr and the early years of Umar. What did the night scene in the mosque look like during that period?
It was honestly chaotic. The historical text describes scattered groups. You walked into the mosque at night and there was this chaotic low hum of overlapping noise. One man is praying entirely alone in a dark corner. A group of 5 is praying with a loud reciter over there. Another small group is huddled by a pillar. It was deeply uncoordinated individual worship.
Enter Umar ibn al-Khattab. This brings us to phase 3.
Umar walks into the mosque one night, sees this complete scatter, and his highly organizational brain just kicks in. He says, I think it would be vastly better if we gathered all these people together under one single reader. So he uses his authority to appoint Ubay ibn Ka'b, who is universally known as the most beautiful reciter, to stand at the front and lead everyone in a unified rhythm.
And this established the exact format we see in thousands of mosques all over the world today. Straight rows of people, one single imam leading. And Umar had a very famous reaction to his own decision, right?
Yes, he did. The next night, he came back to check on things and saw the rows perfectly straight, the single melodic voice reciting the Quran filling the entire room. And he looked at it and said, Nimat al-bidah hadihi, which translates to, this is an excellent innovation.
Innovation, now that is a heavily loaded word in religious circles. Usually innovation implies heresy.
It absolutely is a loaded term today, but historically he meant it purely linguistically. He was saying, we didn't do it exactly like this specific structured way before, but this organization is undeniably good. It highlights the dynamic flexibility of the early community to organize their communal worship in a way that maximized the spiritual benefit for everyone.
And then Ali ibn Abi Talib, the fourth caliph, comes in and adds the physical lighting. This is honestly a cinematic scene described in the text.
It is so vivid. By Ali's time, they had started physically hanging oil lamps in the mosque to facilitate the all-night continuous recitation. Ali comes out on the very first night of his Ramadan, sees the main mosque glowing brilliantly with light in the dark city, hears the unified Quran recitation, and he just stops in his tracks. And right there, he makes a spontaneous eulogy for Umar, who had been dead for several years by then.
What did he actually say in the eulogy?
He looked at the lights and said, May God illuminate your grave, O Umar, just as you illuminated the mosques of God with the Quran.
That is just beautiful language. It poetically connects the physical light in the stone building to the metaphysical light in the dark grave. It shows a deep continuity and profound respect between these historical figures.
And the prayer itself was incredibly intense back then. Today we call it Taraweeh, which literally translates to rests, because you were supposed to rest between units. But the text mentions some groups in the early days were basically spiritual marathon runners. They did not rest.
The text specifically mentions a man named Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani.
Ayyub was an absolute elite athlete of the night.
Right.
The text says he would continuously recite 30 long verses per unit of prayer. And we aren't talking short 3-word verses. These are dense, complex paragraphs of scripture.
Standing completely still for hours on end.
Hours.
Huh.
And the text notes that the regular people standing behind him would literally have to lean on wooden staffs and canes just to keep from collapsing because of the extreme length of the standing. And when they finally took the designated rest, the tariqah, between the prayers, Ayyub wouldn't even sit down to rest. He would instantly start praying voluntary prayers entirely on his own.
The man had absolutely zero chill.
Zero chill whatsoever. But it perfectly illustrates the intense fervor of the era. They viewed this month as a strictly limited time offer. They desperately wanted to extract every single ounce of spiritual value from the dark hours.
Which naturally brings us to the logistics of basic human survival. If you are standing in prayer all night and working in the hot sun all day, how do you biologically function? The text talks specifically about the necessary fuel, suhu, the pre-dawn meal.
The prophet formerly called it the blessed meal, and he made a very sharp theological distinction here. He said the core difference between our specific fasting and the fasting of the people of the book, referring to earlier Jewish and Christian communities, is the eating of the suhoor meal.
Why does that specific distinction matter so much?
It's heavily about forging a unique community identity. Previous religious traditions often fasted continuously for 24 hours, or believed that once you went to sleep, the fast had officially started and you couldn't eat again. Early Islam introduced this specific pre-dawn refueling window. It functions as an act of physical mercy to the human body, but also an act of firmly defining the new community's distinct practice.
But the blessing part is what gets wild. The text states that God and his angels actively send blessings, salah, upon those who wake up to eat suhoor.
Let's really unpack the weight of that. Usually in this theology, divine blessings descend when you are doing something overtly spiritual. reading scripture or crying in prayer or giving away large sums of money. Here you are half asleep. Your hair is messy, you are shivering in the dark, shoving a piece of dry toast or a date into your mouth at 4:30 a.m. And the text says legions of angels are actively praying for you at that exact moment.
But why? It's literally just eating breakfast.
Because the core intention totally converts the basic biological act into a high spiritual one. You are eating not because you are physically hungry. Honestly, most people are slightly nauseous at that hour, but strictly to strengthen yourself to fulfill the command of God for the upcoming day. You are deliberately fueling the engine of worship.
It's highly strategic. The text even formally advises using the siesta, the midday nap called the Qailula, specifically to energize your body for the long night prayer. It is basically ancient biohacking for peak spirituality.
It absolutely is. And for those who genuinely struggle to eat heavy food that early in the morning, the Prophet provided a minimalist safety net. He said, have suhoor, even if it is just a single sip of water.
Again, coming back to the water, it's the most accessible element.
It ensures absolutely no one misses the massive angelic blessing due to poverty or a weak stomach. Wake up, drink one sip of tap water, receive the intense angelic prayer, and officially start the fast.
So we have built the entire structure now. We have the long warm-up, the strict fasting of the physical limbs, the social charity of handing out water, the sheer endurance of the night standing, the pre-dawn fuel. Now we enter the final aggressive sprint, the last 10 nights.
This is the intensive search for Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power we analyzed earlier with the massive multiplier. The communal energy shifts dramatically here. The historical texts say the prophet would firmly tighten his belt, physically wake his entire family up, and stay awake the entire night.
And there is a strong historical warning against dangerous complacency here. The text mentions a somewhat harsh governor named Al-Hajjaj, who got deeply annoyed with people confidently claiming tonight is definitely the night.
He aggressively wanted to maintain the suspense. The theological ambiguity of the exact date is a deliberate feature. It is not a bug. If we mathematically knew for absolute sure it was always the 27th night, human nature dictates we would sleep comfortably for 9 nights and only worship hard for one. Hiding the exact date forces you to treat every single odd night as a potential jackpot.
And then finally, the grueling month ends. The sun brightly rises on the first day of the new month, Shawwal. It is Eid, the festival.
The text beautifully calls this morning Yom al-Jaiza, which means the day of prize giving.
I really love this closing imagery. The narration says that unseen angels physically stand at the main intersections of the roads as people walk to the morning prayer.
They call out loudly, and the text notes that every creature hears it except humans and jinn, saying, "O people of Muhammad, come out to a generous Lord." He gives great rewards for very little effort.
Very little effort. I have to say, it definitely did not feel like little effort when we were severely dehydrated with a migraine at 2 p.m.
Fair point. But compared to the ultimate reward, an absolute eternity in those flawless ruby gardens, where the last fight never loses its flavor, 30 days of hunger is mathematically very little effort. And then the angels officially announce you were commanded to fast, and you fasted. You were commanded to pray, and you prayed. Now return safely to your homes with your prizes fully secured.
And the narrator of the text adds a quick historical footnote here that I found crucial to understanding the whole system. He says these are not at all like the temporary prizes of earthly kings.
Right, because what do earthly kings give you? They give you a nice silk robe, a fast horse, maybe a heavy bag of gold.
Yeah.
Things that inevitably fade, things that rust, things you eventually lose. The prize here is called the Ridwan, the permanent ultimate satisfaction of God. It is complete, total forgiveness. It is the final clearing out of that terrifying ledger we talked about way back in Hayaban.
It is a total factory reset of the soul. You theoretically walk out of that morning Eid prayer with a 0 balance on your sin account and a massively inflated balance on your good deed account.
That is the complete architecture of the season. It is a highly sophisticated machine deliberately designed to purify the human being from the inside out.
So we have successfully traveled the entire historical arc. From the anxious forward-looking prayer in Rajab, let us reach Ramadan, pushing through the terrifying mortality audit of Shaban, stepping into the harsh discipline of the physical fast, the communal charity of the water, the sheer physical endurance of the night, standing all the way to the final cosmic prize giving.
It becomes incredibly clear it is not just a rote ritual. It is a profound annual recalibration. It forcefully pulls you out of flat industrial time and drops you directly into deep sacred time.
But there is one final thought, one specific nagging detail from this entire massive stack of text that I just cannot shake. It just keeps gnawing at the back of my mind.
I think I know exactly which one you mean.
It goes all the way back to the very beginning, the grudge exception in Shaban.
It really is the most haunting detail in the whole collection.
We just spent an hour talking about literal oceans of mercy, red rubies, green emeralds, 70-time mathematical multipliers. We talked about the sheer grueling physical endurance of standing completely still all night long in the dark, but the text strongly suggests that all of that, the entire massive, complex spiritual project we just outlined, can be instantly short-circuited by one single internal thing. And it is not a major crime like murder. It's not theft. It is quiet internal resentment.
It essentially implies that the absolutely heaviest baggage a human being can possibly carry isn't actually standard sin, because standard sin can be quickly wiped away with this simple, genuine apology to God. The heaviest baggage that ruins everything is Shana. It is stubbornly holding on to hatred against another human being.
That is exactly the provocative thought I want to leave the listener with today. If this entire spiritual season is designed as a direct journey to an eternal paradise, the source material explicitly suggests you literally cannot fit through the final door if your hands are completely full of old arguments.
It inevitably forces a very uncomfortable question, doesn't it? Who are you personally still holding a grudge against right now? Whose specific name immediately makes your chest physically tight? And the ultimate brutal question you have to answer for yourself is, holding on to that warm, familiar anger really worth missing the entire season for?
That is a deeply uncomfortable question worth sitting with in the quiet. And that wraps up our deep dive into the source material for today. We will see you next time.